All right, today we are jumping into one of the biggest questions in the economy right now. We're going to be digging into a new Citi research report that makes a pretty bold call on what the Federal Reserve is about to do. So let's get right into it.
This is the question on literally everyone's mind. Whether you're a homeowner, an investor, or heck, anyone with a credit card, is some relief finally coming? Well, this explainer is going to walk you through exactly what the experts are seeing in the data right now. Okay, let's not beat around the bush. The Citi report gets straight to the point. They are predicting that the Federal Reserve is getting ready to start cutting interest rates again, and they have a specific month in mind, September.
But, and this is important, notice the little bit of hesitation in there. Citi is pretty confident that a cut is on the way, but they also point out this tension caused by mixed data. It's kind of what's making Fed officials tap the brakes for now, just waiting for those last few pieces of the puzzle to click into place.
And just so we're all speaking the same language, when we say a rate cut, we're talking about this, the policy rate. You can think of it as the Fed's main control lever. They pull it up to make borrowing more expensive and cool down the economy, or they push it down to make borrowing cheaper and give the economy a little boost.
So, if the economy is slowing down, why is the Fed waiting? Well, it all comes down to inflation, and this is where things get tricky. The data is basically telling two completely different stories at the same time, which creates this real tug-of-war for the Fed.
See, on one side, you have the price of, well, stuff. Goods like electronics or furniture. Inflation there is pretty calm. But on the other side, you have the price of services. Things like getting a haircut, traveling, that kind of thing. And that number came in hotter than anyone expected. That's the part that has some folks at the Fed a little worried.
The Fed even has a special, kind of nerdy name for this particular type of inflation, supercore. It's one of their go-to metrics because they think it shows them what's really happening with underlying price pressures. And yeah, lately that picture has looked a little concerning.
And this really is the key question, right? Because if supercore inflation is really taking off again, there's just no way the Fed can cut rates. But the report decided to dig a little deeper and ask, was this jump actually the scary trend it looked like on the surface?
And boom, here's the answer. The analysis found that the jump wasn't this big, broad increase in prices across the board. Nope. That whole scary number was mostly caused by a weird, one-time spike in portfolio management fees, which was probably just because the stock market was doing well. In other words, it was a blip, not a trend.
Okay, so with that little inflation mystery basically solved, we can zoom back out and look at the bigger picture. Because once you get past that one quirky data point, the rest of the economy is sending some very clear signals that it's probably time for the Fed to ease off the brake.
The report lays out 4 big signs that things are cooling down. Overall economic growth has slowed, manufacturing is pretty much stalled out, the job market isn't as red hot as it used to be, and this is a big one, consumers are starting to spend less.
And honestly, that last point is so important. For months, the American consumer just kept spending on services, and that's what kept the whole economic engine humming along. But now it looks like that engine is starting to sputter.
And you can see it with your own eyes right here. This chart shows that spending at restaurants and bars actually went down in July. I mean, it's a really clear, tangible sign that people are starting to be a little more careful with their cash, and that's a classic signal of a slowing economy.
Now, the job market is also showing some of those cooling signs, but it's happening in a very specific way. We're not talking about huge layoffs just yet. The story here is a bit more subtle. So check this out. The number of people filing for unemployment for the first time is still low. That's great. It means companies aren't really firing people. But the number of people who are staying on unemployment is creeping up. So what does that tell us? It suggests that while your job is probably safe, if you do lose it, finding a new one is getting a whole lot harder. The hiring rate is slowing down. So, you put all this together, and the case for a September cut looks pretty solid. But like the report says, the Fed wants to see just a little more proof before they pull the trigger. So here are the key dates we all need to be watching.
First up is the big meeting for all the central bankers out in Jackson Hole. Then we get the huge data drops for August, the jobs report and the inflation report. You can bet those two reports will be the final pieces of evidence.
And it all leads up to the big Fed meeting on September 17th when they make the final call. Okay, we've talked a lot about macroeconomics and Fed policy, but let's bring it all home. How does a decision made in some boardroom in Washington, D.C. actually affect your life? Let's connect the dots from Wall Street straight to your wallet.
Well, when the Fed cuts rates, borrowing money usually gets cheaper. So we're talking about potentially lower interest rates on things like mortgages, car loans, even your credit card balance. It can also give the whole economy a nice little boost. Now, the flip side is that the interest you earn in your savings account will probably go down too.
And that really brings us to the final big question. The data is pretty clearly pointing to an economy that needs a little help, and it seems like the Fed is ready to step in. But the real cliffhanger is this. Is a rate cut in September going to be that perfect, gentle nudge that keeps the economy on track? Or is the slowdown happening faster than anyone realizes, making this a classic case of too little, too late? I guess we're all about to find out.